All right, today we're going to be jumping into, of course, we talk about a lot of technology. One that is a little bit light on our channel here that we really need to bring back in is solar and alternative energy. So that was one that we really wanted to focus in on today. We know we have so many people that follow us through the EV side and alternative energy, so we wanted to focus in on that. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to Tech Path. Today, joining me is Gareth Soloway, who's the Chief Market Strategist of In the Money Stocks. Great to have you on the show, Gareth.
Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. So Gareth, you're based here in Florida, right here in the Sunshine State. So you get to, trade at will like crazy madmen down here, having
That's
fun.
right.
I love it. Let's talk about the solar market in general. When you look at where, I guess the industry has been moving and I will say to a certain extent, it's been led somewhat by Tesla and, Solar City and kind of that merger that occurred a few years back and kind of that evolution. And now we're starting to see real activity happening at the governmental and legislative level. Are there any things that you're watching specifically in the solar category that's interesting to you right now?
Yeah, I definitely think you want to keep an eye on the solar companies, the main ones. First Solar is a big one out there. Sunpower is another one. I have a personal experience with Sunpower. I actually recently moved from Oregon and I had Sunpower solar panels on my roof there, even. And half the year there, we have clouds and it still performed amazingly well. So I think if you're looking at the longer term, all these things that is doing in terms of mandates and getting the solar and alt energy into more mainstream government as well as pushing it out into the public, those are all going to absolutely benefit these stocks going forward. Now, in the shorter term, there's a different outlook here. So I'm more of a chart guy, a technical analysis guy, and a
Yep.
lot of the charts are looking a little bit on the weaker side in the near term.
Yeah. I want to jump to a couple of those before we get to those charts. I wanted to jump over to a story here from Electrek. So solar could make up 40% of U.S. power by 2035. This basically came out with Biden's adjustment on kind of where things are going. How do you see this rolling out? Because there's some interesting things here. First Solar breaks ground on you had mentioned the $680 million, 3.3 gigawatt solar factory in Ohio. Obviously, you're seeing tax credits in the solar industry could go rapidly by 2035. Do you think that is the period of time between now and 2035 that we're going to see most of this action in the market?
I do. So the stock market and investors, at least big institutional investors, are very forward looking. So you always have these bigger players positioning themselves for probably the next 1 to 3 years in terms of their investments. And remember, they're not buying 100 shares; they're buying millions of shares potentially. So they can't just get in it on the whim of an investment, right? So I think you are going to see that shift. It usually occurs earlier on in the cycle, so you should
Hmm.
see that shift over the next 3 to 5 years, even if it's 10+ years out where the adoption or getting to
Right.
40% is.
Yeah, it's kind of like the bell curve. If you look at where
Yeah.
the social media markets were in 2007, and had you invested in Twitter and Facebook and those kind of things, even if you go back further into Google's life, any of the FANG stocks that have kind of really had that kind of upswing, solar could be in that window right now to what you're pointing to. I wanted to jump to the chart here for First Solar, because that was kind of the reference of that one. And here we had that low on July 27th, trading at around $79. I'm just going to kind of track this up and continue. A little bit of movement, and then this thing had a little bit of a drop right here at this point, which was on July 16th, a couple of days ago. What do you feel like is causing that kind of action to move on First Solar a little bit, especially with this recent movement from a legislative standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the legislative standpoint, it's very bullish, right? But you have to look at kind of the internals of how much the stock was up. So it looks to me like the stock ran up precipitously from around the
Yep.
70-ish level or so all the way into the near 100 level.
Yep.
And I
Right
think
at 100.
anytime you have a stock move like that, what's healthy for it to actually do is digest that move. And that means consolidation, sideways chop, maybe a little bit of a pullback. So a lot of investors gets very skittish when they see a stock that pulls back. Let's say it runs from 70 to 100 and it pulls back to 90 or 95, they get skittish. But in all fairness, that's actually a healthy move for the stock. And that's my
Hmm.
guess of what's going on here, at least in the near term.
What do you feel like? So if you look at First Solar, I want to stay on this one for a second. This currently trading at right at $92 a share. Earlier in the week, up to 97. Obviously, if you had owned this back in July, what a great what a great
Yeah.
opportunity at around $80. So do you feel like this is one of those stocks that can run really up into the mid 100s or maybe even a 200 mark? Or is this something that, hey, it's going to take some time to really get some air?
Yeah, so I do think it has potential to be quite a big mover to the upside. This is the one caveat. So as an investor, if you're following the chart, there's a pivot low going back to 2020 in, I believe it was, let me just look on my chart here, September of 2020. So you have to go back a little ways. And
Not a problem?
if you connect that to the low from September, let me see here. It looks like the low going back to about May of 2021.
Yep,
So
right there.
that low
Yep.
there, you just don't want to see price action get below that low. So that's what I
Mm,
look for. So as an investor, you always have to look at the positives, which are obviously what's going on with the government and pushing solar out. But you also have to kind of protect yourself to the negatives. And that's the one area I wouldn't want to see the stock break, which to me looks like that trend line's around $73, $74. As long as the stock holds above that, you should look for that $110 high to get taken out that you see just up there. That's the recent high on
right.
the chart, right there. And then that's where the breakout can occur. So as long as you don't take out that trend line to the downside, I think again you
Yeah.
stick with First Solar to the upside.
Interesting. All right. So that's a keeper. It sounds like if you're in the alternative energy space and you're looking at kind of going in that direction. You also have, a lot of movement here. Solar could supply more than this was coming over from Congress. 40% of U.S. electricity by 2035. This is one of the big things they're going on the clean energy friendly policies. These are just some of our notes here, such as tax credits for solar farms, manufacturing facilities, and then solar currently making up 3% of the U.S. electricity. So that seems to be a huge opportunity here. You're talking going from 3% to 40% basically in 15 years. I mean, you're creating a whole market space, it seems like.
Yep. Yeah, and not only that, but think about the credits that are going to be offered and that are offered to incentivize people to put in solar. I mean, there's going to be this major push, and that's why I think the solar energy area is definitely kind of a forgotten area, at least from the recent price action in the stock. Again, even if you're looking at First Solar, it's kind of been going in a sideways motion for the last, you could even call it last year and a half or so. But there's a huge amount of potential upside. The question is, can they put this into play? Can the Biden administration really push this forward and get this going? And if it does, these companies could see a huge surge in revenue and ultimately profits. And the question I have going in the future would be, where is the valuation, right? So do they start getting treated like a utility, or is there still that premium?
Right.
And that's the one caveat that we'll have to kind of monitor throughout the next couple years.
So we, of course, living here in Florida, we are truly the Sunshine State, and we have a lot of activity coming over from Florida Light and Power, or FPL Power and Light. And when you look at what they're doing, and I want to jump to a story here. This was just August 16th, also over on Electrek, but essentially they're saying world's largest solar battery powered system now 75% complete. This is right here in Florida. Look at that farm. That's amazing. But you look at this kind of movement, do you see more companies and more utilities moving in this direction? I mean, Texas kind of comes to mind the most, obviously, with Tesla now being based in Austin, or to a certain extent really developing in Austin. Could we see a lot of grid changeovers occurring in, say, the next decade to really drive some of these solar stocks?
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely going to see that. And especially as you see these solar panels, they're starting to get down in terms of cost from
Right.
production to basically rival what it costs these companies to actually produce electricity. And so you have the positive, right? So you have the social aspect, which is, every company now wants to be socially acceptable and do what's right for the environment, which is going to drive partially the switch over. And then you have the cost side, which absolutely is starting to rival the cost of just producing electricity and other methods. So there's those sides which will absolutely drive it. And again, these are all positives over the longer term that are going to drive
Yeah.
solar usage.
Yeah, I want to jump back to this story. This is Manatee Energy Storage. This is the space here in Florida. This is going to have a 409 megawatt capacity, ability to deliver basically 900 megawatts of energy, enough power, 329,000 homes. I know that's not a massive amount, but for one of the first real solar farms here in Florida, that's a pretty impressive number for up to 2 hours. So this would be basically like a battery backup for any kind of potential in a major outage, which we have here, obviously with hurricanes, things of that nature. But man, this is if this is a good start. Imagine if you had 10 of those, 20 of those, 30 of those in the state of Florida. Now you're really starting to supplant the traditional ecosystem in terms of traditional grid electricity. With that being the case, would you be pointing more toward the cell manufacturers, or would you be looking at some of the integrators that actually produce the solar products and sell them, like say a Tesla or someone like that?
Yeah, so I think you would want to be diversified with both. So you want a little bit exposure to both because you just never know which one's going to take the lead. And by having a little bit of both, you'll have exposure to the upside of both. And what I would say too is it's about time for Florida, right? I mean, Florida,
Yeah.
so much sunshine. How is it taking this long to just throw up all these solar panels when it's basically, once you have it up, free energy? So it's amazing to see, especially with all the storms these days hitting Florida and coming near to Florida, the environmental impacts and how much Florida relies on tourism. It's really great to see. And I agree, 5, 10, 15, 20 of those solar farms, and all of a sudden you've made a huge dent in the energy production and where it's coming from.
Yeah, I think any other areas that you're watching though in terms of the alt energy space. Let's talk quickly about Tesla because obviously we're talking Tesla. We can't leave them out, or talking solar. We can't leave out Tesla. Recently, solar roofs a little bit slow down. There's been a situation with the Powerwall now. You've got to have a solar roof to get a Powerwall. There's all those kind of little caveats. Obviously, a lot of this is really a derivative of where the battery situation is going. But do you think Tesla will be a major player in this market space in, say, the next 5 years?
I do think they will be. Now, having said that, their valuation from a technical perspective, and again, I'm a trader, I'm a swing trader, which is a much shorter term, their valuation already reflects a large part of that. And that's the concern. So, if you're looking for where to invest, the PE ratio on a First Solar is much more attractive to me than what you see on a Tesla. Tesla, in fact, has a bear flag on the daily chart. And I actually
Right.
think it's headed back to the $400 range, which currently, sitting near 700 is quite a dip. So, even at $400 a share, Tesla's market cap is still humongous compared to other automakers, other solar producers, and all these battery backup type players. And at that price, then I would start to get interested. Now, again, that has nothing to do with them being a major player. They're going to be a major player, absolutely. Elon Musk, again, he's a genius when it comes to this stuff. So they'll have a huge foothold in this.
Let's go into some of these others because you mentioned one company, SPWR, which is Sunpower. Now, this one is tracking down a little bit. Do you think this is one of those that might be an opportunity to buy because it's trading in around 20 bucks a share right now?
Mhm.
Obviously, up from its crazy high not too long ago at $57 a share.
Yeah, so
Thoughts
when
on
I
that
look
one?
at a chart, like this, if you connect those two lows, so
Hmm.
the low right there
Right
to,
here.
yeah, those
Yep.
two lows, so that's your level that you want to be careful on. So if price starts trading below that, it's basically like breaking through a floor, and it can have a
Yep.
decent correction. The next big support on that I would get interested in would not be until about the $12.50 range. And again,
Ah,
it's
okay.
trading at $20 right now, just above $20. But I think again, this is the key. The chart to me is holding support, so you go with it. You say, okay, this can still go up. It may fight off this level, and that would be called a double bottom. But
Right.
if it breaks, then you jump off of it, off the bandwagon, and let it correct, and then look to accumulate basically at a lower low.
All right, so you mentioned QuantumScape, and tell me what you know about QuantumScape, and just, I mean, obviously that's a little different, type of stock, a little bit more alternative energy, but when you look at that one, talk to me about where you see this one going.
So one of the reasons why I'm just keeping my eye on QuantumScape is because their technology, which hasn't been produced yet, it's basically
Right.
developmental at this point. It's one of those that could be a game changer in the industry. Now at these levels, I don't know if I would put a lot of money at risk because there's obviously, as I said, developmental, and there could be issues
Hmm.
that go on there. But for sure, you want to be in a position where stock that's trading so far off of its highs hit $130
Yeah.
late last year. Now it's trading sub $20. This is where you could kind of say, okay, if it gets down to 15 or even in this 19 range,
Hmm.
tuck a couple speculative shares away. And when you talk about speculation, right? this isn't an Apple. This isn't something you put a lot of money in. It's kind of like, okay, this could be my lottery ticket, right? If I'll throw $1,000 in it, that's a very minor portion of my investable income. And if it pans out, it could be a 20, 30, 40 bagger in this situation. So I love those emerging technologies because the risk is that it goes to zero. So you could lose your $20, but the upside reward could be 100, 200, three hundred
Yeah.
dollars per share. And that's where you get something that's attractive to me.
Yeah. With the industry and the kind of the surrounding technology companies that kind of circle the wagons around solar, when you look at both QuantumScape, maybe someone like an Enphase, I wanted to jump over to their chart, now trading at 164 right here. Had a lot of action here in the last 3 months, and then it's kind of gone a little sideways here. What are your thoughts on where Enphase may end up, say, year end?
So year end, do me a favor and connect that big green candle low there
Yep.
to the current lows right
So
there.
we're at
Yep. So just bring that
164.
across.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Looks
So
like
again,
we
you
are
can
at
see these stocks. What's
164.
amazing about these stocks is that a lot of them are down into key support, and it's of the utmost importance for them on a technical basis to hold these levels. If they break through, it likely has a move down on that chart. It looks like about to $145 or so.
Right.
All right,
Yep.
so yeah, just you can see that pivot all the way in the very start of your chart over there. Yep, right there.
Right there.
And
Yep.
that is a major support right there. So basically I would just look for that. I would say, okay, if this stock breaks this current range of looks like about $160 or so right there, then it could go to 145. I'm a buyer absolutely at 145 based on technical support there.
So kind of trailing that one down with Enphase current situation, tech sell-off we've seen, we've talked a lot about this on the show where there seems to be a little bit of movement in traditional stocks to crypto. And, a lot of people have kind of talked about that. Even myself, my own portfolio is starting to move slightly more toward crypto, mainly because of a hedge. And I'm looking for potentially a little bit of a market correction, which I don't know if this is it that we're in right now. We got a lot of red on the charts
Yeah.
these days. But what are your thoughts about that kind of shift over the next, say, 3 months toward the end of the year?
Yeah, so number one, I think you're right on that. I am personally expecting a corrective move here. I think we might have started it over the last couple days. The big test for the S&P is going to be, the past corrections in the S&P have been 3%. And
Hmm.
yesterday, or as of today's lows, we were down 2% and change. So that's going to be the big test: is do we break below 3%? If we do, I think you get as much as a 10% correction in the S&P. I think if you see that, you will see Bitcoin come in a little bit here. But I think as a smart investor, moving a little bit more towards crypto, again, keeping it well diversified in your portfolio of many other
Yeah.
things, that is something you have to do in this day and age. And again, I might be slightly bearish on Bitcoin in the near term, but long term, I do see it as an alternative to the money printing that's going on, what the Federal Reserve is doing. The Fed keeps telling us they're going to tighten, they're going to reduce quantitative easing. The problem is, as soon as we hit a new crisis, then they start the printing presses again.
Right.
And it
Yeah.
makes something like a Bitcoin very attractive because there will only be 21 million ever mined in the Bitcoin realm. And again, watch the institutional adoption of that. That's of the utmost importance. A lot of people bash regulation on Bitcoin. They say, oh, we don't want it. I want it because the more it gets regulated, it becomes mainstream. If it becomes mainstream and regulated, then institutions will feel more confident in purchasing it, which will then again create a more stable currency for the future.